What you're going to hear from now is really critical. This is the global talent that Dr. Jha talked about earlier this morning. These are the most successful researchers in Rhode Island, people that represent that cohort, the people that are winning NIH grants. These are incredibly hard to get. We have incredible track records at our universities in Rhode Island, both at the University of Rhode Island and at Brown University, which are represented by individuals on this panel. And I just really want to highlight that it's this creative, early stage science that needs to be nurtured, fostered, and then help spinning out into ideas that become commercial. And to the point in the last panel around this niche in neurotech, I think you'll see that thread and through line through this panel. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my panelists, and I'll start here on the end with my colleague at the University of Rhode Island, Claudia Fallini.
My name is Claudia Fallini. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Cell and Molecular Biology at URI. I also have an affiliation with the College of Pharmacy in URI, and I am a core faculty member of the Ryan Institute for Neuroscience. I have a lot of affiliations. So my research interests lie kind of in the early stages of the spectrum of research from bench to bedside, and our research interest is trying to understand the molecular drivers of neurodegeneration, neuronal dysfunction, both in health, aging, and in diseases such as ALS and Alzheimer's disease.
Thanks, Claudia. Nicola?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicola Neretti. I am an associate professor at Brown University in the molecular biology department. I am the associate director for the Center on the Biology of Aging. My research is on aging. In particular, my lab has been involved in the study of the accumulation of cellular senescent cells in tissues as we age, and we're trying to characterize the mechanism of this occurring, using them as biomarkers of aging and identifying intervention that can clear these senescent cells and extend lifespan and health span.
Marty?
Hi, everyone. My name's Marty Taylor. I'm a new assistant professor at Brown. Actually, Nicola and I share a wall. I've been at Brown since July. I moved down from Harvard, where I was for 9 years. And actually, somebody just mentioned a CPRIT grant, a DPRIT in Texas. I was offered $4 million to go to Texas. I might have taken it if my wife hadn't said that, I can go to Texas. It's amazing to be at Brown. My lab works on transposons, or the dark genome. Most people probably don't know anything about this. I'll just say very briefly that actually only 2% of the genome is genes. 98% of the genome is essentially hundreds of thousands of copies of what look like viruses. And everybody used to call them junk, but we now are starting to understand that they're involved in actually a lot of common diseases, especially cancer and neurodegeneration. And my lab does two things. On one hand, we really just basically figure out how they work, and we use that, that kind of stuff that is of no interest to a company whatsoever, to then make therapies and diagnostics. And I've been very involved with Rome Therapeutics here in Boston.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marty. I want to talk very briefly before we get into kind of the heart of the matter and talking about academe into companies, which is really to talk about this ecosystem that we have in Rhode Island. What do you see in our small but mighty state that makes sort of doing this work even more possible? Claudia?
So we've heard about it already from the previous panelists, but I think we have definitely a great pool of researchers that are at fantastic universities, Brown, URI, and all of the other institutions around Rhode Island. But I think one thing that struck me about research in Rhode Island is the diversity and the variety of research topics and research excellence areas that are in our small state, from ocean health, engineering, biomedical research. And so this opens up opportunities for partnerships across different disciplines that might be harder to get in a larger state, in a larger environment. One example is the initiative on microplastics, for instance, that is involving everybody from ocean scientists to biomedical experts and engineering to really push innovation and create in this environment where really partnership can spawn new innovation.
Thanks, Claudia. Nicola?
I totally agree about this, and I think there's a lot of will to collaborate within Rhode Island, and I feel this at Brown particularly. I've been at Brown for a long time. I come from the actually physical sciences and through the computer sciences into biology. And it's very easy to go knock on the door of some of your colleagues and start a collaboration. And I think this has been a theme across all of my career and has made Rhode Island a very special place. There is competition, but it's more of a collegial environment that led to new avenues in my research and other people's research. For example, I am part of the Center for Computational Biology, so we collaborate with computer scientists, with people in physics, and people in neuroscience, so there's a lot of that cross-pollination of ideas.
Yeah, I think part of the reason I came to Brown is that the people who are running the whole medical division, from Mukesh Jain, who's the dean, the chair of my department, and also the head of our Center of Aging, are all real scientists who have discovered things, so they get it, and they're hungry. And so there's a real vision that we were building something new at Brown, that they were going to not only just say they were going to do it, which a lot of people do, but they actually were going to put their money where their mouth is. And so they've really made it easy to build something there and have attracted a lot of people to kind of all be together in one center. So we have, in a small place, we can't be great at everything, but we can be really, really good at the things we're good at. And that people can be really collegial and work together. And so it's been pretty incredible.
Yeah, I like that point about being good and excellent at what you've got a talent pool in. And so, Marty, I'm hoping that you can then talk about, this experience you've had with spinning your kind of really basic research ideas out that are funded by the National Institute of Health and taking that into that commercial space and talking about what that transition looks like and what your experience has been.
Yeah, so I work on something weird, and when I was doing my PhD on this and then some work afterwards, people would say to me, you're a medical student, why are you working on this thing that's only interesting as to why we are no longer monkeys? Why don't you go work on something medically relevant? And then a colleague of mine at Mass General did a clinical trial where they repurposed HIV inhibitors that are safe with the idea to target these transposons, which look a lot like HIV. They gave them to 30 dead colorectal cancer patients, right? Stage 4 patients, nothing left. You're going to die. We have nothing to offer you. And out of the 30, 9 of them had an objective response to the single agent when nobody thought anything was possible. So that was enough to get things started. And when that was getting started, I was the world expert on this thing that nobody gave a shit about, right? Ultra deep, little tiny thing that it was just not interesting to anybody until all of a sudden it's a drug target. And we had the expertise to get it off the ground really quickly and build something at Rome Therapeutics. But that only happened because it was out of this ecosystem here, right? The CEO had been at Nimbus, and she's brilliant, and she had the vision to pull everything together. That's Rosanna Capeller. And then the founders knew what they were doing from having spun out companies before, and that's all coming out of this ecosystem. So I think the combination of the community and the opportunity together let it happen. And so, we're trying to build on that momentum. Rome has some molecules going into the clinic this year that we're really excited about for autoimmunity and neurodegeneration. And then we're trying to spin out at Brown new ideas in the diagnostic space, and also for another related dark genome target that isn't in Rome's portfolio right now that we're going to spin out.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story, and I think it really gets into the point that was raised on the last panel, is those early stages where you're hard at work with your team and your lab and your graduate students, working on things that no one cares about can have massive potential. And that's where it's tricky, right? Those things that no one cares about are really hard to fund. And sometimes I think, when we had talked a little bit earlier about your research, you made a really nice point about if you've got NIH funding and you've got your students funded, people can burn some midnight oil to kind of cultivate those ideas and get them off the ground. So I really appreciated that perspective when we talked before. So I'd like to move on to Nicola. What's your experience been, particularly in this area of the computational biology piece and how that interfaces?
So in terms of the strength of being part of an academic environment in which there's this collaboration, I would say that my experience recently, which is actually leading to trying to spin off a company out of Brown, comes from being part of a large consortium funded by the NIH that includes more than 40 labs. And this is called the SENNet, and it's a large consortium that is trying to map all the senescent cells in all the tissues in mouse and human. This type of research, which involves large data generation and large data curation and analysis, is pretty unique. And I think this is where the pipeline, and I totally agree with Dr. Juh's assessment, that's where academia has a role, and that's where the funding of these kind of projects has a role. So we started with these large consortium that can generate data in a collaborative manner that is not possible to be generated by single PIs. And based on that, my experience is that really allowed us to develop cutting-edge analytical tools through AI, which is one of the expertise in my lab. But especially because AI needs a large data set, this is how you get these large data sets. They are curated, they are generated by cutting-edge labs that know what they're doing, and now we can use those to leverage the AI tools that we developed in order to identify biomarkers for these senescent cells. So that's one of my experiences.
Yeah, thank you for that. Claudia, you're at a bit of an earlier stage with where your research is and where your ideas are taking you in terms of what you can commercialize. Talk about what that next step looks like for you and what you might need to get there.
Yeah, as I mentioned, my research is really at the early stages, trying to identify the drivers of neurodegeneration. So nothing that can get to commercialization anytime soon. But what I was talking about earlier, this ability to collaborate with people working in different spaces, with different expertise, is actually really helping my own research. So for instance, I'm collaborating with a chemical engineer at URI, trying to develop new biomarkers for ALS using carbon nanotubes, which is nothing that I ever thought I would be doing when I started, right? So this ability to talk with different people and meet different people with different expertise and really good at what they are doing and know what they are doing, and put our heads together and come up with something new that, hopefully can lead to something meaningful for the patients.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. And I think I was really thrilled with what Dr. Juh had to say. I mean, he talked about the importance of a deep public commitment to research and to the scientific enterprise, and I think he painted that picture really clearly. But I think it might be helpful for the folks here to hear from your perspective. Again, these are people that came from all over the world to work in Rhode Island that are relatively at an early stage of their career. We want to foster the talent, grow the talent, keep the talent. So what are the threats to what we're seeing now in terms of public support for biomedical research? So Claudia, we can start with you and come back towards me.
Yeah, this is definitely something that it's near and dear to my heart, because the main funders of my research is the federal government, the NIH, the Department of Defense. So the funding from these institutions is really critical to push our research forward and allow that innovation to happen that does not have any immediate commercial value, but maybe in 10 years is seeding, the new breakthrough in life science and maybe the cure for Alzheimer's or other diseases. So there is really no replacement for the federal government, and we can have a very long discussion on how the system is not working at its best and how it could be improved. But at the end of the day, what you need is the support from federal monies that is not looking to have a direct revenue from your research. Is really something that you can pursue your impactful and meaningful and innovative research, because these are the characteristics of research that is funded by the federal government. It has to be significant, it has to be innovative, but it doesn't have to be commercial ready. And then there is really no replacement for that. So if we lose that funding, then we really have to become creative with new source of revenues, new source of funding that will prevent our research going into just being incremental, because that is what can lead to commercial revenues faster.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. Nicola, maybe you can expand upon that and then also talk about this global talent pool that ties into that federal funding.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that with a concrete example about when we submit a grant application, there is a section that is significance, but there's also an important section that is innovation. And I am afraid that if grant applications become more competitive because of a lack of funding, that innovative sanction is going to become like second thought. It's incremental, safe. We want to be sure that we can get to the next step. But this is where academia actually has an edge. And that's where pharma and biotech looks at academia, taking the risk with new ideas that maybe are a little bit out there, but in the academic environment can be developed. And if we stop that source of innovation, I think is very risky for the whole enterprise. Somebody else will have to step in and fund that or do that in lieu of the people in academia. But the second question you asked, my experience is that we have benefited tremendously with the global talent. I mean, I am an immigrant myself. I came here from Italy, and so I ended up staying here. My plan was to actually go back after my PhD, and we've heard these stories before. I ended up staying. And that's why I've been very receptive to the global talent that wants to come here. And I think if we make it harder for them, or even just uncertain, we will have a strong impact with a reduction of the talent that is coming in. They bring in a different perspective. In many countries, they've had to do their research with very limited resources, so that increases their creativity. So that's what I experience when I hire people that come in from abroad.
Yeah, thank you. And you can see we have, two folks of Italian birth, and you think about Rhode Island. We're so proud of our Italian Americans, and to have modern Italian Americans doing biotech research in Rhode Island is just, kind of, I think, a culmination of that part of the immigrant story. So Marty, I'll turn to you because I know you have a really interesting thought and perspective on this as well.
Yeah, so I'm a physician scientist, and that I've been in the training program supported by the NIH since 2005. And so what that means is that millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars are all here, right, in my brain for me to actually be able to do this and to be able to translate things, to walk the line, to understand where the disease problems are, and to translate things into the clinic. And that of course requires the investment. And then I just want to come back to the point that Dr. Jha said about who's on your hallway and who's around, because in my lab there's 11 people in my lab, and 6 of them are not from this country. I have a Turkish woman, a guy from Greece, a guy from Spain, a woman from China, and a couple others from abroad. And I'll just, for an anecdote, I'll talk about the woman from Turkey who's a postdoc in my lab who has an MD from Turkey. So Turkey's a country of 80 million people, and every year about 1 million people graduate from high school there. They all take the same test. She got the best score out of all 1 million of them, okay? So she's not an idiot. And she came here, and she's ambitious as could be, right? She left everything behind in Turkey to come here to get the best training she could. And I ended up with her out of dumb luck through a mentor whose lab she applied to, who was, a fancier person than me. And we ended up clicking, and she's doing work in my lab. Well, she's been in the lab for 1 year. She's filed a patent. She got a Department of Defense grant to fund not only her, but some new technology we're developing. And, more or less everything she's done in a year has worked. So we just have the best and the brightest trying to come here. And, it makes me really sad with what's going on right now. The impact has already happened. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about what's happened to your consortium. But, there are people who wanted to come here from, like these guys have done, who are now really thinking hard about going back to Europe or going to China. And that's not what we should be doing. It's really, the left hand not talking to the right hand and shooting ourselves in the foot. So far, I haven't had to let anybody go, but it was very close when the federal government stopped paying Brown's bills. And we're still trying to figure out different ways to diversify and to be smart about getting money from places that aren't the federal government in case things get worse before they get better.
Yeah, and these cuts are really real, and I think the Ivy League institutions have been at the news, but at the University of Rhode Island we've had 50 million in cut grants, and some of those are for our earliest trainees. These are National Institute of Health grants for undergraduates to start the STEM pipeline. So again, to things that hurt our homegrown talent in addition to our international strengths. So we do need all of you, but I think the point here is that we've got incredible talent in the state of Rhode Island and in the region, and really want to thank you all and hope you get a chance to talk to these scientists because they do have amazing ideas. And if you're a venture capitalist out there, talk to these scientists, but just really wanted to thank you for your time on this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.